Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we bring you another tale of darkness and dread. A story hidden for decades inside the walls of a forgotten asylum, where whispers echo and shadows remember your name. Prepare yourself for whispers beneath the asylum. A journey into fear, bloodlines, and secrets that refuse to die. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more chilling stories every week. Chapter 1. The letter that shouldn't exist. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked neatly beneath Eleanor Price's front door. It had no stamp, no sender's name, and no signs of ever passing through a post office. The envelope was yellowed, as if it had been sitting untouched for decades, yet her name was written across the front in a bold, steady hand. Miss Eleanor Price. At first, she thought it might be a pranker. Students at the university often tried to spook her, knowing of her fascination with abandoned architecture and urban legends. But the handwriting didn't belong to any of them. It looked deliberate, old-fashioned. Inside, a single sheet of thick parchment unfolded with a dry crackle. Professor Price? We request your expertise on the matter of Ashwick Asylum. Records have been disturbed. Histories erased. You will find what remains within the walls. Come before it is too late. An old friend. Her pulse quickened. Ashwick Asylum hadn't been spoken of publicly in over 50 years. The building had been shut down after a series of unspeakable incidents, patients vanishing, doctors rumored to perform rituals instead of treatments, and, finally, a mysterious fire that consumed half the East Wing. Eleanor pushed her glasses higher on her nose and read the letter again. No address, no instructions, no clue as to who the old friend was. Still, she knew she would go. For years, she had lectured about Ashwick, citing newspaper clippings and faded photographs to her students. Now, someone wanted her inside, and though a heavy unease clawed at her stomach, Eleanor began to pack. The town of Ashwick lay far from the comfort of the city, hidden in folds of rolling hills and forests that seemed to choke the horizon. Few trains went that way anymore, and those that did were nearly empty. Eleanor sat alone in her compartment, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks beneath her serving as the only sound. She had brought her leather satchel stuffed with notebooks, a tape recorder, a flashlight, and the letter. She had read it 100 times on the ride, searching for some hidden clue in the loops and slants of the handwriting. The train attendant, a weird-looking man with deep lines etched into his face, paused at her seat as they neared the final stop. "You headed for Ashwick?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," she replied, folding the letter quickly. He lingered, his eyes shadowed. "Don't stay after dark." "Nothing good lingers in that place." She tried to laugh it off, but his words clung to her mind like cobwebs. The town, Ashwick, was not so much a town as it was a collection of houses strung along a cracked road. Many windows were boarded, and what few shops remained open seemed drained of color and life. When Eleanor stepped off the train, a damp chill clung to the air. She pulled her coat tighter and glanced around for any sign of a taxi. There was only one car waiting, a black sedan that looked as though it hadn't been washed in years. The driver was a thin, pale man with watery eyes. "You going up to the asylum?" he asked, as if he already knew. "Yes," Eleanor admitted. He shook his head. "People go there. They don't always come back." The gatekeeper. The car jolted and rattled as it climbed the winding dirt road toward the asylum. Tall pines loomed on either side, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers blotting out the sky. The deeper they drove, the heavier the air became, until Eleanor swore she could taste rust and ash clinging to her tongue. When the asylum finally appeared through the trees, it stole her breath. Ashwick Asylum stood like a corpse of stone and iron. The once grand facade was crumbling, windows gaping like blackened eyes, rooflines sagging beneath decades of neglect. Ivy crawled up the walls, choking the bricks as though nature itself wanted the building erased. At the front gates, the driver stopped abruptly. The wrought iron bars were twisted, locked shut by heavy chains. "That's as far as I take you," the man muttered. Eleanor paid him and stepped out, her boots crunching against gravel. The driver did not wait before she even adjusted her satchel. The sedan had already turned and vanished back down the road. She was alone. Or so she thought. From the shadows of the gatehouse emerged a figure bent, old, and dragging one leg as he walked. He wore a long, tattered coat, and his beard was a wild tangle of gray. His eyes, however, were startlingly sharp. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "I received a letter," Eleanor said quickly, pulling it from her coat pocket. "I'm a professor. I study abandoned institutions. Someone requested my presence." The old man chuckled, a dry, broken sound. "A letter, eh? They still use that trick?" "What do you mean?" But he only shook his head and produced a heavy ring of keys. With slow, deliberate movements, he unlocked the chains and pushed open the gate. The hinges groaned like dying animals. "If you're going in, best take care," he warned. "The asylum remembers." Inside the walls, the air shifted the moment Eleanor crossed the threshold. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant caw of crows perched on the roof. The grand lobby stretched before her, though time had warped it into something grotesque. A chandelier lay shattered across the floor, its crystals dulled and scattered like bones. The walls bore peeling wallpaper, stained with dark patches Eleanor dared not identify. And there were words, scrawled across the walls in jagged strokes, dozens of phrases repeated. "They watch. Don't listen to the whispers. The fire cleanses nothing. Her heart hammered as she moved further in, her flashlight beam trembling across the vast hallways. The deeper she ventured, the stranger it became. Doors creaked open without a breeze. Paintings long rotted still seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. And then she found it. On a rusted chair in what must have once been the records office sat another envelope, yellowed, thick parchment, her name written in the same steady hand. Miss Eleanor Price. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Hands shaking, she opened it. Inside, a single line was written, "Welcome home." Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the parchment. The ink looked fresh, as though it had been written moments ago. She turned in circles, scanning the room with her flashlight, but no one was there. Only the smell of mold and burnt wood clung to the air. "Welcome home." The words echoed in her mind, louder than the silence. Home. She had never set foot in Ashwick before. The temperature seemed to drop. Her breath curled in faint mist before her face. Then footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. They echoed from the corridor behind her, the sound of boots dragging across linoleum. Eleanor froze. Her heart pounded in her throat, but her rational mind screamed someone must be squatting here. Another historian, a local. She lifted her flashlight and called out, "Hello? Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then a whisper, soft and low, curling like smoke from the darkness. "Eleanor." Her blood turned to ice. Nobody here should know her name. She stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of rusted filing cabinets. The crash echoed through the asylum like a scream. Dust exploded into the air, choking her lungs. The flashlight flickered, sputtered, then went out. Darkness swallowed her whole, and in that darkness something moved. She heard the scrape of nails against metal, the low rumble of breath too close to be imagined. She fumbled with the flashlight, slapping it until it blinked back to life in a weak, narrow beam. The light caught a shadow at the far end of the hall. Tall, distorted, watching. Before she could speak, every door along the corridor slammed shut in unison. The thunder of wood and metal was deafening, like the asylum itself was sealing her in. Her legs obeyed before her mind did. She ran through collapsing halls, past broken gurneys and shattered glass, until she found herself back in the grand lobby. She bent over, gasping for air, the flashlight beam shaking wildly across the floor, and then she saw it. Another envelope, lying neatly atop the broken chandelier. Her name? Again, but this time, the message inside was shorter. "Don't leave." Eleanor dropped the letter as a chorus of whispers rose all around her, dozens of voices speaking in unison, too fast to understand, but all of them chanting her name. The walls groaned. The floor trembled, and as she backed toward the shattered doors of the asylum, one final sound reached her ears, softer than a breath, yet sharper than any scream. Laughter. Chapter 2. The asylum remembers. The morning after. Eleanor hadn't realized she had passed out until the chill woke her. She was slumped against a wall in the asylum's front lobby, her flashlight dead beside her. The faint gray of dawn spilled through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn floor. For a moment, she tried to convince herself it had all been a dream, the whispers, the footsteps, the laughter. But then her gaze fell on the envelope lying inches from her hand. "Don't leave." She pressed a hand to her temples, her head throbbing. "Why me? Who would go to such lengths just to lure me here?" Her rational mind tried to cling to explanations. A cruel prank. A group of squatters trying to scare her. Maybe even her colleagues testing her nerves. But deep down, something in her bones whispered the truth. Ashwick Asylum was not merely abandoned, it was alive. The old caretaker, determined to regain some control. Eleanor stumbled out into the morning light. The iron gates were still open, but standing just beyond them was the old man she had seen the night before, the gatekeeper with the ring of keys. "You made it through the night?" he croaked, eyeing her with something between pity and suspicion. "Why didn't you warn me?" She snapped, her voice sharper than intended. "I did," he said simply, "but people never listen. The asylum, it remembers everyone who steps inside. It knows your name now. It won't let go so Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "What do you mean it knows my name? Who left these letters?" The old man turned away, gazing at the trees as though searching for words. "I've seen many come here. Journalists, ghost hunters, even priests. They all received letters, same as you, and every one of them thought they were the first." Her blood ran cold. What happened to them? His silence was answer enough. Searching for answers, back at the small inn in the village, Eleanor spread her notes across the bed. She had promised herself she wouldn't run away. Not yet. If this place truly tied into the legends she'd studied her whole career, she had to know the truth. Digging through her satchel, she pulled out faded photocopies of old newspapers. Ashwick Asylum closes after mysterious blaze. 1952. Families demand answers. Missing patients still unaccounted for. Dr. Alistair Hargrove, unorthodox treatments questioned. Hargrove. That name surfaced again and again, the asylum's last chief physician. His reputation was split down the middle. To some, he was a visionary experimenting with radical cures. To others, a madman dabbling in forbidden rite. Eleanor underlined every mention of his name. Something told her the letters and the voices were tied to him. But there was something else that gnawed at her. In one of the articles, blurred in the corner of an old photograph, was a woman, dark hair, sharp features, standing beside Dr. Hargrove. Her face was eerily familiar. So familiar, in fact, that Eleanor felt as though she were looking at an older version of herself. Returned to the asylum that evening, despite the ache in her limbs and the pounding in her chest, Eleanor returned to Ashwick. The gatekeeper was gone this time, but the chains on the gate were once again drawn tight. And yet, as she placed her hand on the iron links, they fell loose with a sudden clatter, as though unseen hands had undone them. She swallowed hard and stepped inside. The asylum was darker than before, though night had not yet fallen. Windows that had let in morning light were now choked with grime, as though decades of dust had gathered in a single day. Her flashlight flickered back to life after a few hard shakes, and she pressed forward into the west wing. The air was thick there, heavier, as though it carried the weight of countless whispers. Her ears strained, catching fragments of voices that darted in and out like half-remembered dreams. Don't trust him. The doctor sees all. She looks like her. She froze. That last whisper, it was spoken clearly, and it was directed at her. Chapter 2 continued. The asylum remembers. The records room. The corridor narrowed, lined with peeling green paint and rusted door frames. Eleanor's flashlight beam cut across fragments of broken signs. Ward C, Observation Hall, Record. Her pulse quickened at that last one. She pushed open the warped door and entered. The records room smelled of damp paper and mildew. Filing cabinets leaned drunkenly against one another, their drawers half open, stuffed with rotting folders. Piles of documents littered the floor, their ink blurred by water stains. But one cabinet stood strangely intact, polished, as though untouched by time. Eleanor tugged the drawer open. Inside were files neatly arranged, their labels written in the same steady handwriting as the letters. She pulled one at random. Patient Margaret Price. Admitted 1927. Status undisclosed. Her breath caught. Price. Her surname. Hands trembling. She flipped through more files. Dozens of them bore her family name. Uncles, aunts, even her grandmother. At the back of the drawer lay a folder thicker than the rest. Its cover bore only one word: bloodline. Inside were photographs sepia-toned, blurred with age yet unmistakable. One of them showed a young woman strapped to a gurney, eyes wide in terror. She looked almost identical to Eleanor. Her stomach churned. This wasn't possible. She had grown up miles away, her family never mentioning Ashwick. And yet, here were records tying her bloodline directly to the asylum. The first apparition. The air shifted. Cold. Heavy. Her flashlight dimmed, sputtering. Papers fluttered as though stirred by a phantom breeze. And then she heard it. A low, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against metal. Eleanor turned. At the far end of the room stood a figure. A woman in a patient's gown, hair tangled and wet, skin pale as ash. Her eyes were dark pits, but her face was Eleanor's own. The figure tilted its head, lips curling into a grotesque smile. Eleanor stumbled back, knocking over a stack of files. No, you're not real. The apparition stepped forward, its bare feet leaving wet prints on the floor. With each step, the whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a deafening chorus. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Her flashlight flickered, the beam strobing between light and darkness, and in that flashing, the figure seemed to multiply dozens of Eleanor's reflections, filling the room, all smiling that same terrible smile. She clapped her hands over her ears, screaming, "The hidden message," and then silence. The figures were gone. The room was still. Eleanor gasped for air, her heart hammering. Her flashlight steadied, casting its pale glow over the toppled drawer. Amid the scattered papers, one folder lay open, its pages untouched by dust. Inside was a note, handwritten in bold strokes. The doctor chose your family for a reason. You are the key. Don't run. Her throat tightened. Her entire life, her fascination with forgotten institutions, the strange pull she'd always felt toward Ashwick wasn't chance. It was design. And then the lights overhead flickered on. Not her flashlight. The asylum's lights, every bulb buzzed into life, flooding the halls with a sickly yellow glow. The building was waking up. The doctor? From the hallway came a voice. Calm/steady? Male. Eleanor. At last. Her blood froze. The sound of polished shoes echoed against the tile, growing closer. She knew that voice. Though she had never heard it, she had read enough about him, seen his name enough times in old journals to recognize it instantly. Dr. Alistair Hargrove, dead for 70 years. Yet his voice was clear. Alive. Chapter 3. The doctor's experiment, the voice in the hall. The echo of polished shoes grew louder, each step steady and deliberate, as though the man behind them had all the time in the world. Eleanor's skin prickled. Eleanor! The voice repeated, calm and confident. You've come further than the others. That makes you special. Her flashlight trembled in her hand as she backed away, pressing herself against the records cabinet. Who are you? She demanded, though she already knew the answer. The voice chuckled softly. You already know. You've studied me. You've recited my name in lecture halls. Alistair Hargrove, at your service. Her stomach lurched. Dr. Hargrove had died decades ago, consumed in the fire that closed Ashwick forever. Yet the way he spoke, measured, patient, with an unsettling charm, made him feel very much alive. You're dead, she whispered. A pause, then a low laugh, smooth and deliberate. Dead is such a fragile word. Here in Ashwick, death is only a doorway, and you, Eleanor, were meant to walk through it. The experiment lives on. She gripped the folder tighter in her hands, the one marked bloodline. What do you want from me? You already carry it, Hargrove said. His footsteps stopped just beyond the threshold of the records room. Your family was chosen decades ago. I saw potential in the Price lineage's Ilianza, a certain receptivity. They were ideal subjects. Her chest tightened. Subjects? I began with your grandmother. The voice continued smoothly, as though recounting nothing more troubling than a lecture. She resisted, of course. They always resist at first, but her blood carried something unique, something that allowed me to go further, to open doors that others could not survive. Images flashed unbidden in Eleanor's mind. The woman in the sepia photograph strapped to a gurney, her own face staring back in terror. You're lying, she said, though her voice cracked. Am I? Hargrove asked. You felt it, haven't you? The pull toward this place. The whispers in your dreams. You never questioned why your career bent toward forgotten asylums. Why Ashwick haunted your thoughts. It's because the asylum remembers. And it remembers you, the shadow at the door. Her flashlight beam wavered toward the door. And there he was, a tall man in a doctor's coat, its once white fabric now stained and frayed. His face was pale, impossibly pale, the skin drawn tight over sharp cheekbones. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers behind glass. Dr. Alistair Hargrove smiled, and the smile was worse than any scream. Eleanor staggered back, clutching the folder to her chest. You can't be real," she muttered. "Oh, but I am," he said softly, "and soon you'll understand why you were brought here. Why you can't leave." The overhead lights flickered violently, casting his figure in jerking fragments of light and shadow. With every flicker, he seemed to move closer, though his feet never lifted. Eleanor bolted. The maze of Ashwick, the hallways twisted around her, impossibly warped. Every turn she took led her deeper into the asylum, though she could have sworn she'd run in circles. The whispers followed her, some shrill with laughter, others weeping, others chanting her name over and over again. She burst into what had once been a treatment ward. The room was lined with rusted gurneys and cracked leather restraints. Jars of cloudy liquid sat on shelves, their contents unrecognizable. On the wall, scrawled in letters jagged and dark, were the words, "The experiment continues." Her chest heaved. She wanted to run, to scream, but her legs locked as a faint glow filled the room. From the far corner, shapes began to stir. Patients, or what remained of them. Their bodies were twisted, elongated, their faces blurred as though half erased from memory, yet their eyes dark hollows fixed on her. And then they spoke in one voice, low and rattling. "Daughter of Ashwick, you belong to us," the patients' chorus. Eleanor's breath hitched as the shapes lurched forward. They did not walk so much as stagger, their limbs moving in jerks, like marionettes pulled by unseen strings. Their hospital gowns fluttered, stained with decades of decay, yet their voices boomed in unison. "Daughter of Ashwick, you belong to us." She backed against the wall, her flashlight beam sweeping across their faces that were both familiar and grotesque. Some bore her family's features, cheekbones she recognized from old family photos, eyes that mirrored her own. "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently. "You're not real. You can't be." The nearest figure cocked its head, jaw unhinging with a sickening crack. From its throat came not a scream, but words clear, sharp, echoing with authority. "You will finish what your blood began." Hargrove's truth. The overhead lights buzzed, flared, then died. Darkness swallowed the ward. In that suffocating void, Hargrove's voice slithered through the air. "They resisted me once," he said softly. "Your grandmother, your uncles, even your mother. But you, Eleanor, you are stronger. Your blood carries every failure, every experiment, perfected. You are the culmination." "Stop it!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're lying. My family never told you," Hargrove interrupted, his tone tinged with mock pity. "Of course not. Would you have listened if they had? Or would curiosity have pulled you here all the same?" The patients shifted closer. The smell of mildew and burnt flesh thickened, choking her lungs. "What do you want from me?" she shouted into the dark. "To continue," Hargrove replied simply. "To complete what I began." The chair. The patients parted, forming a narrow path through the ward. At the end of it, illuminated by a single, flickering bulb, stood an old restraint chair. Its leather straps hung loose, but fresh buckles gleamed as though polished that very morning. On the chair's armrest lay another envelope, her name written in bold. Eleanor's knees weakened. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she stepped forward, compelled as though invisible hands guided her. She picked up the envelope, her fingers trembling. Inside was a single sentence. "Sit and remember." The patients chanted, louder now, the words reverberating against the walls. "Sit, sit, sit." Her head spun. Memories not her own flooded, her mind flashes of her grandmother's screams, her mother's tears, the cold touch of restraints against her own wrists, though she had never worn them. She staggered, clutching her temples. And then she felt it, a pair of cold hands on her shoulders, firm, insistent. Hargrove's voice whispered in her ear, "It's time, Eleanor." The collapse. The ground trembled. The patients shrieked, as if struck by unseen whips, their forms convulsing before dissolving into clouds of ash. The ward shook violently, ceiling tiles crashing to the floor, walls splitting with jagged cracks. Eleanor ripped free from the phantom hands and bolted, clutching the folder against her chest. The asylum seemed to fold around her, corridors twisting, doors slamming, shadows chasing at her heels. She stumbled down a stairwell, nearly falling headlong, until she burst into a vast underground chamber she had never seen before. The room was lined with iron doors, each marked with patient numbers, but one door at the far end stood open, spilling out a faint and natural glow. Inside, she could hear breathing, slow, steady, patient. Her heart thudded. She took one step closer, then another. And then a voice, calm and close, though no one stood there. "Welcome back to the beginning, Eleanor." Chapter 4. The beginning and the end, the chamber below. The underground chamber smelled of rust and rot. Moisture dripped steadily from the ceiling, the sound echoing like a heartbeat. Eleanor's flashlight beam cut across rows of iron doors, their numbers long corroded, their bolts rusted shut, except one. At the far end, a single door gaped open, spilling out a faint glow like candlelight. The air around it felt thicker, charged, as though the asylum itself was holding its breath. Clutching the bloodline folder to her chest, Eleanor stepped forward. Each footfall seemed to reverberate louder than it should, as if the ground itself amplified her presence. Inside the chamber was a simple metal bed. Restraints hung from its sides. But what froze her blood was not the bed, it was the wall above it. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Every generation of her family, stretching back nearly a century, their faces pinned in neat rows. Some she recognized from faded albums, others she had never seen. And at the very end of the line, her own face, captured from an angle she couldn't remember. A photo of her in the asylum's lobby, taken yesterday. Her knees buckled. The doctor appears, do you see now? The voice came from behind her. She turned slowly. Dr. Hargrove stood in the doorway, his figure more solid than before. His white coat trailed the floor, pristine despite the decay around him. His eyes glowed faintly, burning with patient obsession. "You were never free of Ashwick," he said softly. "Your bloodline was bound here long before you were born. Every step you've taken has led you back." Eleanor clutched the folder tighter. "Why me? Why my family?" Hargrove smiled, and the sight of it chilled her more than any scream. "Because your family carries the resonance? A tether between worlds. Others broke under the weight of it. But you are strong, strong enough to complete the work." Her throat tightened. What? The experiment?" he said simply, as though the answer should have been obvious. "The one that will free us all. The choice." The glow in the chamber brightened. The iron doors rattled, one after another, as if unseen fists pounded from within. Whispers rose, dozens of voices overlapping, pleading, screaming, chanting her name. Hargrove stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Sit in the chair. Eleanor. Accept your place. Become what you were always meant to be." Her hand shook violently. The folder slipped open, its papers spilling across the floor. Among them, one page she hadn't noticed before slid free. A journal entry, written in her grandmother's hand. "If she ever comes here, tell her not to trust the doctor. Tell her the asylum feeds on us. Tell her the only way to end it is to burn it all." Eleanor's chest heaved. "Burn it all." Fire and ash. Hargrove's shadow loomed taller, stretching across the walls like a living thing. The whispers became screams. The chamber shook violently, dust cascading from the ceiling. Eleanor's hand brushed against her satchel. "Her light is more silver." At the rows of photographs, at the folder that had stolen every certainty she'd ever had, and then she made her choice. With trembling fingers, she struck the lighter. The tiny flame flickered weakly against the darkness. Hargrove's smile faltered. "No," he said quietly, almost pleading. "You don't understand. If you destroy this place, you destroy yourself. Maybe that's the point," Eleanor whispered. She dropped the flame onto the papers. Chapter 4, Final Part. The beginning and the end. The Inferno. The flame caught instantly. Old paper, brittle with age, ignited in a rush of orange light. The fire spread across the scattered documents, then leapt to the photographs lining the wall. The chamber filled with smoke and heat. Screams erupted from the iron doors, as though the fire had awakened every soul trapped within. The walls shuddered, paint blistering, metal groaning. Hargrove's voice thundered above the chaos. "Foolish girl, you don't know what you've done." Eleanor staggered back, coughing, tears streaming from her eyes. The flames twisted strangely, curling upward as if drawn by invisible hands, forming shapes, faces screaming, hands clawing, shadows writhing. She clutched the lighter in her hand, ready to drop it again if the fire faltered. But then something strange happened. Through the smoke, she saw Hargrove not consumed, not burning. Instead, he stood calmly, his outline shimmering like heat haze, and then he smiled. "You think you've ended it," he whispered, his voice carrying perfectly clear over the roar of the fire. "Eleanor, you've only begun." The collapse. The ceiling cracked. Chunks of concrete fell, smashing into the floor. Eleanor bolted for the stairwell, flames licking at her heels. The walls themselves seemed alive, writhing and pulsing, as though the asylum was resisting its destruction. She burst into the main hall, but it was no longer the same. The chandeliers glowed again, whole and shimmering as they must have been decades ago. Patients wandered the halls healthy, alive, laughing softly. Nurses wheeled carts, their uniforms spotless. Ashwick was alive. She stumbled through the vision, her mind spinning. Was this memory? Hallucination? Or had the asylum truly pulled her into its past? A nurse passed her by, smiling politely. "Dr. Hargrove is waiting for you, Miss Price." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The last sight? She turned toward the grand staircase, and there he was, Dr. Hargrove, standing at the top, arms outstretched in welcome. Behind him, the asylum glowed with impossible life, free of decay, bustling with patients and staff. Yet even as she watched, the walls around her flickered, burnt, ruined, then whole again. Fire, then light, destruction, then restoration. Both realities fighting for dominance. Her vision blurred, her body trembled. She didn't know if she was still in the fire, still running, or already lost inside the asylum's memory. Hargrove's voice echoed one last time. "Welcome home, Eleanor." The world dissolved in smoke, laughter, and screams. And that was tonight's story. Whispers beneath the asylum. Was Eleanor consumed by the flames, or trapped forever within the asylum's living memory? The truth remains hidden. If you enjoyed this tale, make sure to hit the like button, share the video with others who love mystery and horror, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next dark journey. Until next time, sleep well if you can.